So I'm really delighted to bring on stage Patty McCord. Many of you probably know Patty from her work. She became sort of famous, or internet famous, in 2009 when Netflix, so Patty started her career at Sun Microsystems, actually in HR. I think she met Vinod in the elevator, but I'm sure Vinod doesn't remember this. But in any event, started her career at Sun Microsystems. And spent 14 years as chief talent officer for Netflix. But in 2009, Netflix published this Netflix culture deck, which went viral. Like 5 million, 6 million people watched this, sort of online. And there's a lot of profound elements to that deck that attract a lot of attention. We'll talk about those, sort of profound elements in detail. More recently, Patty published a book called Powerful, which is all in your gift bags. Highly recommend reading it. We'll take some time and go through some of what I found to be the most interesting lessons. But I'd like to welcome Patty, and we can talk about culture building, which is really the most indispensable part of building a company.
Hey, everybody. I love that you used the movie metaphor.
Oh, cool. All right, great. Yeah, so we can talk about data versus movie building.
Yeah.
So let's start with the culture deck in 2009.
Yep.
Most of how many people in the room have actually consulted this deck at some point?
Aww.
Okay, so about 40%, 35, 40%. So we'll gloss over some of the basic elements. It's a pretty sophisticated audience, and we'll dive into some of the counterintuitive parts.
Yeah.
So to me, the most profound part was the idea that process is inconsistent in its intention with innovation. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, process repels the most talented people. Mm-hmm. And so that if you want a critical density of talent, you can't use process. Mm-hmm. So explain how you derive that and how you applied it at Netflix.
Let me go back a little bit on the deck. It took us 10 years to write it. Years. So for those of you early in your company career, that takes a long time. So what we did was, Rita and I had worked at another company before, and we grew through merger and acquisition. So every time we acquired a company, we doubled. And so I'd take their handbook and our handbook, and I'd smash them together. And that was the first time he was the CEO, and we both kind of sucked at it. So when he talked me into coming to Netflix, which I said no, I thought it was the stupidest idea I've ever heard. He said, let's build the company we always dreamed of, and let's write it down. And so the first thing we wrote down were behaviors that we value. So if you haven't looked at the culture deck, the first part is like the values. And what we meant was behaviors, not like aspirational values. We rewrote that part 6 times in the 14 years.
What was the biggest delta in just that section that got rewritten?
At one point, I said to Reed, I'm like, okay, I walked in, there were maybe 40 people. I'm like, well, these 5 people have to go. And he said, why? And I'm like, because they're not smart enough and you're not going to tolerate them. Let's just be clear.
I should have hired you in my career.
Right? It's like, really? So I got the severance agreements ready. He's like, no, this time I'm going to give people a chance. I'm like, how long can you be in the room with this person? Like 12 minutes? So let's just not do it. So it said like, intelligence, or people were like, are you giving us IQ tests? And we revised it over time because we realized over time that there was more to being smart than intelligence. And the first time he promoted me, this was at Pure, he said to me, you're not very good at math. I just heard you talking, right? And we really appreciate that. And so, you'll never be that good. So
I like the candid feedback
over the 20 years he and I have worked together, I've convinced him that at the beginning he wasn't particularly good at people. So we balance each other. So that's it. So every chapter is built on the chapter before. And so the question you asked was about process because, two things. One of them was I instinctively knew it would slow us down, because I'd been through that before. And I can't, the unbelievable stupid hours you spend deciding whether yours should be first initial, last name, or first name dot last name on your email. The endless conversations about stupid shit like that, it just wastes time. And so it was the time wasting thing. It was like, why should I insert process into this? And we got to get stuff done fast. And the second one was, honestly, I was kind of sick and tired of being the HR chick. And like every time somebody had a question, I was supposed to come up with a policy. And I'm not very good at it, and I hate it. And I thought, wait a minute, what if I hired adults, big concept here, and I said, what would an intelligent person do in this situation? I'm going to trust you to be intelligent, back to being smart, right? And being, adult. Then I don't have to write it down.
Got it. And then so, in addition, then one of the other parts of the DAC and Netflix culture is context, like giving people, the adults need information.
Yeah,
and they can't make
I was hearing
decisions.
I was listening to you thinking exactly about this question. So in the early days, we used to have a meeting in the parking lot that we called the metrics meeting. And I would walk around the company going, metrics, metrics, metrics. And I realized that I was so into the business, and I was such a participant in the business. And if I hired really smart people, so were they. So it became sort of this constant MBA program, like explaining to people how we made money, explaining to people how much money we had in the bank. When we had a layoff in the first couple of years, we laid off a third of the company. And when it happened, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I mean, it was a big deal, and we couldn't do it because it was all we had left to cut, because we had to buy DVDs and stamps and envelopes, and it was a capital. You're talking about frugal offices. I didn't do the I didn't do the Bezos you bring in your door for a desk, but I did shop at Costco. I mean, this is in fact true. So, by the time that happened, everybody knew something had to go, because we knew exactly how much money we had and how much money we were spending, what the cost per shipment was, and so I think that the really, really important thing to learn early on is the most important thing you can teach anybody in your company is how to read a P&L.
Yeah, so this is in the book. You talk about, like, if you could do only one training, leadership training, executive training, the thing you would prioritize is teaching people their P&L.
Yep. Where they sit in it, right? I remember consulting to Warby Parker in the early days, and one of the they had moved to New York, they had moved, and they were all upset because they couldn't bring their customer service people. So they moved to Soho, right, New York. And I said, how much are you paying those guys? They're like, well, I'm like, what, $11 an hour? And they get out of the subway and they walk past Gucci. I mean, this must piss them off every single day. And can you imagine how long it takes people to get here? I mean, nobody lives in Manhattan. So what the hell are you doing? And so I remember Neil Blumenthal said to me, oh, I got to go talk to the CS people. I'm like, forget that. Send the CFO. And tell them, hey, by the way, it's not about talking to cranky customers. So it's $17 for the cost of acquiring a new customer, right? Let's say it's $17. Yep. So every time you have a customer that hangs up the phone and goes, that was so cool, they were great. You should get your glasses at Warby Parker. You just put $17 on the bottom line. That's your job, right? Your job is to put money to the bottom line so we can spend it on something else. And so it's up to so I'm like, they need to know that.
Yep. So we actually did this at PayPal too, and I sometimes joke about it, but we did actually in the parking lot.
Yeah.
We had
parking lots are great.
The monthly company meeting was all about the P&L.
Yep.
And after 2 years of doing it every month, it got a little boring, so we finally changed it. And we'd literally print out back then.
We did too.
The same.
Yeah, we did
Printed out
too.
spreadsheets.
Yeah, we did too.
We'd actually go line by line.
Yeah.
And that was the company meeting.
So the story was that later we found out that Blockbuster sent spies to hide in the bushes on Friday afternoons for the metrics meeting.
Obviously didn't help them.
Well, it's just because they knew we were talking about that good stuff.
Well, they probably should have spent that, $250 million to acquire you.
Well, here's my favorite Blockbuster story. We're listening to the Blockbuster earnings call on the Polycom in the middle of the folding table, speaking of back in the day, right? And someone asked John Antioco, the CEO of Blockbuster, what do you think of Netflix? And he says, stop asking me about that stupid little company. They are nothing. They are nobody. They are a gnat. They don't even make noise. So don't ask me about them. They don't matter. And I'm looking across the table at our CMO, and behind her head is the whiteboard, and it's our customer base. And we looked at each other and went, they don't know.
That's like BlackBerry, the BlackBerry and the iPhone.
They don't know. So, I mean, our next metrics meeting was, don't say a word. Like, don't talk about it at lunch.
We have a high turn rate.
It's like, don't, when you're in bed with a spouse, only in bed can you whisper these words, but do not tell, because we knew they'd just snuff us.
So I highly recommend reading the whole book, but like a couple highlights. So most of the people in the room already have a company that's in progress, so the culture is a little baked.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, Jeff Bezos spoke here, and he said, culture has to be descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yep.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you do if you're one of these CEOs and you like parts of your culture, but you want to change some parts?
Well, first look in the mirror. Because culture is how people behave. I'm very Margaret Mead about culture. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And it's also really important to recognize that it's the holistic part of your company. So I'm consulting to a company that gives annual performance bonuses. Right? And it's based on this, 27-point, metric that nobody on God's earth except the CEO understands how to do the performance bonus that's paid out every year at the end of the year and the beginning of January, right? And so I'm sitting down with them. They've been around for a while. And I'm like, so tell me, before we get started on going through the 72-page slide deck that you sent me about the bonus, have you ever not paid it? What do you mean? I'm like, you've always paid this, right? Yeah. So it's actually not a performance bonus, it's deferred compensation. Well, no, compensation's different. I'm like, it's money that goes in their pockets. I'm going to call it compensation, right? And so basically, you're incenting people to be employed December 31st, and that's it.
Yep.
Right? None of the other 27 points matters whatsoever. And so, I did another talk at Volvo, and Volvo was gonna, they were gonna go to the, to leasing model, and all of their franchise were gonna go into stop making their money from repairing cars, and they were gonna lease cars, and I said, so do these people want to change? They'll be up for it. I'm like, so what do you do at the meeting? Do you have an award that you give? Yeah, what's it for? Longest running franchise. Like, you're incenting them to do the same thing they've always done.
So when you consult for companies, is this one of the first things you do is like kind of audit the tactics against the goals?
No, the first thing I do is meet with all the execs, and I look for consistency. Like back to, communicating the culture, right? So do they have any documents that I can see that says this is who we are? And then I interview everybody to find out if, in fact, that's who they are. And by and large, somebody's off.
Yeah.
And then, or nobody's cohesive, right? And the CEO says, I want to be transparent, but everybody knows you can't get anything out of him or her, right? Or everybody knows that marketing and sales fight all the time, and they point at each other, and right? So it's the culture is the leadership and what people see. Right? What people see. And how you might imagine that is when somebody goes home at night and says to their partner or their pet, it was a great day at work, or today sucked. What do they say? Right? My CEO is an idiot. I mean, I can't believe, right? Nobody can say anything. Or is it they go, we did it. Right? Nobody goes home and says to their pet, macadamia nuts in the cookies today? Oh my God. I love working there. Free beer. Yay.
Well, they probably do at Google, but
Well, they do. Yeah, they do. And I mean, and Google is so first of all, Google's not Google anymore. So let's stop saying that. Google is Alphabet. Alphabet is many different companies under the same roof with, by the way, the same policies.
which is the first mistake.
Across the board, right? So you're all independent. You're all independent, and all the HR people go, I have to do a corporate thing. It's so, it's not independent. And second of all, none of you are Google, so stop it. Right? I mean, it's just a stupid comparison that we've made for way too long in the Silicon Valley or wherever you are in the world doing what we do. It's just, you don't want to grow up to be Google. It's yucky.
I agree. So let's talk about.
I mean, every time I go to Google, I come back, I'm like, those guys, I'm sorry.
So
Many of you are probably from there, and there's probably a reason.
Exactly.
Just saying.
Exactly, a magnetic pull to do something interesting. So let's talk about yucky topics. So one of the questions I always get asked is when to hire HR. How do you know when you should hire HR? How many people? Is there criteria? We can talk about who to hire, but like when do you start?
Okay, I think HR is broken into three parts. One of them is administrative and compliance. You need that the entire time. That can be in your legal team, that can be in your finance team, whoever it is, and you want the people that are on that team to obsess about data and detail. Like they need to wake up in the middle of the night and go, I spelled his name wrong, I might have to kill myself, right? In fact, I remember doing a dinner with a group of CEOs, and one of them said to me, you say you want A players in every job, but you don't really mean it. And I was like, yeah, I do. And he goes, no, I mean, not every job. I mean, some of them just don't matter. I'm like, really? What job in your company doesn't matter? He's like, well, like, payroll. Like, you don't want an accurate, obsessive, anal retentive person to care about paying the important people, your engineers, right? He goes, yeah. And I said, by the way, your finance organization, they hate you. And he said, you've never been to my company. I'm like, you just told me, a perfect stranger, that you think the person in payroll is stupid. You don't think they know? They are busy tweaking every little thing to just piss you off a little bit. Nothing big that they'd get fired for, but it's maybe making something a little bit late or like, oops, that was wrong, right? So the question you asked me, so that's one part, right? Administrative and compliance.
Like absolutely perfect.
The second part about HR is talent and recruiting. And almost all startups outsource that, and it's the dumbest move you could make. It's the most important skill for you and your team to get great at, because hiring a great team makes a great company, period, end of story, right? The job of a leader is to hire a great team that gets amazing work done on time with quality that makes the customer happy. Any other questions? Okay? And so you don't hire somebody in HR to hire for you. You can. You're just going to waste a bunch of time with a bunch of people that don't fit. We can talk about hiring as a separate subject. And the third part is sort of the leadership coaching thing. And you can get a lot of that externally. That part has to have a business person, not a therapist. A business partner, not a therapist. If you need therapy, go to therapy. That'd be great, right? I think it's terrific. But you need somebody to say, I know what you said, let me tell you what they heard.
So this is part of the advice in the book is don't hire an experienced HR person. You're much better off with a business generalist. Explain a little bit more why.
Oh, because the HR... So there's a thing called the Society for Human Resources Management, SHRM.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah, well, you'll get lots of resumes that say SHRM certified on it, right? And they have a course where they teach you how to, do all the stuff that HR people do. Most of it's completely useless. Anyway, I got asked to speak as this SHRM meeting, and I was like, "You're kidding me, right?" So I said to them, "I'm like, I'm the Antichrist, right? Like, I can't believe you've asked me to speak there. Like, you guys, you shun me, right?" And they're like, "Well, maybe." And the head of SHRM was like, I gotta change this place, and like nobody will listen. So the traditional HR people are trained to have a dichotomy, to have a tension between the business and the people, and they're there to protect the employees, or they're there to be the CEO's spy. I had somebody hire me one time and said, I love this company, and they're like, so if somebody told you something and they told you not to tell me, what would you do? I'm like, I wouldn't tell you. I know, but like if it was something about me, I'm like, I wouldn't tell you. Well, I know, but I would tell them, look, I'm not going to tell him or her, and by the way, nothing's going to happen. Because if this person doesn't know, they can't fix it. And I'm not going to tell them because I don't work for them. So I'll help coach you on how to have that conversation. And I really think you should have that conversation. And oh, by the way, you're not the only person that wants to have that conversation. So if we all have that conversation, then we won't have to deal with this shit anymore. But I'm not going to tell. And he was like, nope.
So actually, it's become pretty popular among a lot of the CEOs I work with to hire a business generalist and put them in the HR sort of role.
Yeah.
How do you know which business generalists, because how do you filter? Because this is a very common conversation, is like, which of the business generalists that are in my company or I can go hire?
They have, my CFO one time said to me, you're a diva. And I'm like, God, say that again. You can tell me that, but from here until forever, what makes you believe that's true? And he said, because whenever I'm ready to hire somebody who's perfect on paper, they're from the right school, they have the right experience, they have the right companies, and you tell me, no, like they don't like our business, they don't like our company, and they don't like you, but they like the salary and they like the title, and so that's why they're coming. And so, by the way, this isn't going to work out. You're right 100% of the time. And he said, so, you have this gift. And I'm like, I really want to walk away, but the truth is we have the same gift. Yours happens to be with numerals, mine happens to be with people. I'm very, very good at pattern recognition.
How do you scale? I think that's
so you want to look for somebody
who has that
pattern recognition and that intuition. So when I talk about hiring people, for example, I always say you want to create an interview team, you want to script them, you want them to meet beforehand, you want them to decide who's going to ask. I'm very, very strict about recruiting. And I'm like, and you want somebody on that interview team who has a track record of hiring great people, regardless of their function.
Yep.
Right? So, I'm and I always would interview at the end. I'm like, so who was the most interesting interview you had? You're like, oh, that marketing chick. Like, what the hell am I interviewing with her for? I mean, I'm a technical guy. She asks really hard questions.
That's a great question, though. Actually, I want to steal it, of who's the most interesting interview.
Yeah.
A lot of data in that answer.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and how did it go? And were they on time? And, I taught everybody in the company that if a stranger was sitting in a chair, your job was to say, are you here for an interview? Can I see your schedule? Because you should be holding it in your hand, physically holding it in your hand. If you're there physically, we can talk about remote work, and we might disagree on that. But you want to make sure that everybody in the company recognizes that whoever walked in the door took time out of their busy, probably employed life to spend some time with you, and so they need to be treated with the utmost respect, which includes, first of all, like the Google stuff that makes me crazy is like, what does it take, 4 months to hire somebody? For God's sake, the job's probably already done. Of course, at Google, you can have 700 of them, so somebody's doing it somewhere anyway, right?
But in most of the startups, definitely not. The job better be done within 4 months.
well, I don't want to left turn there because it may be another question. But
Well, the other...
you want to go to hiring?
We could talk about hiring, or maybe one tangent. The other sort of counter HR philosophy in the book that's very stark is about performance reviews.
Yeah.
Or not doing performance reviews.
Yeah.
So
utter fucking waste of time.
Exactly. We could stop there. Yeah. I'm totally on board with this, but like maybe explain in a paragraph sort of level why they're not a waste of time. Or we could refer
let's say I was at Netflix, and it was the time when we were starting to think about streaming. And we were starting to talk about what might be a great experience for the customer, right? And we could have a really great conversation about that. Let's say we were at Netflix with all these smart people, and I was talking about giving people feedback. And I said, I got an idea. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Once a year, at the end of the year, we're going to look back on the entire year and give somebody feedback on their performance, and we're going to use that information to decide how to pay them next year. And everybody would go, okay, Patty's got an idea. Anybody else? Anybody? Because it's a stupid idea. Okay, so first of all, I separate pay from performance. I think it's two different things. And so let's talk about pay as market-based. Period. End of story. It's real estate, right? You pay, and oh, by the way, your fantasy house is different than your fantasy house. You want a cabin in the country, you want a penthouse apartment. Those are two completely different things. So the performance on those two things is different, and their worth is different. Okay? So it's a scarcity-based economy. I've been in the Silicon Valley my whole life. There's always somebody that's the new hot technology that nobody else has until everybody has it, and then it's all flattens out again. Okay? So that's compensation. Performance is, so, you know, what we typically talk about in feedback, we say critical feedback, which is such horseshit, right? It's like that bad thing you did, that was so bad. If you do that again, you're going to be in big trouble. It's, for those of you who have children, it's called guilt tripping. We're very good at it. And the next time you do that bad thing, because you will, you're going to feel bad. But it's really inefficient. Right? It's really inefficient. It's much better if I go, you know, we're about to close the meeting, and you've been bending my ear for the last 3 months about what a stupid idea you think this is. And here we are, an hour into the meeting, you haven't said anything, so what's up? Right? That's feedback. Okay, here's another one. Here's the one that everybody forgets. I know this because I worked with Reed Hastings, and Reed's original software that he wrote was an error detection software. He found errors while you were making them. So he's really good at critical feedback. And so one of the things I tasked him to do when I first met him was I said, go find 5 people doing something right and tell them. He's like, why? I said, because I think it's really effective and it would be really helpful. Will you tell me why? I'm like, yeah, I will tell you after you do it. Okay, well, I mean, I could do that this afternoon. I'm like, fine, go do it this afternoon, right? How will you know? I'm like, they'll tell me. Well, why will they tell you? I'm like, just do it, right? Monday goes by, Tuesday goes by, Wednesday goes by. I'm like, nobody's wandered into my office talking to me about you telling them they did a good job. Well, you know, I got stuff to, I'm a CEO. I'm like, oh, you can't do it, can you? So Thursday afternoon, some, back in the day, QA engineer comes in and goes, oh my God. Reed came by my cubicle and he said he heard about this bug that I found. I'm getting champagne. My wife and I are going to dinner. I mean, it's amazing. Find somebody doing something right and tell them, and guess what they'll do? That day. Right? So feedback is not just negative feedback. And so the other thing is, you know, I'm really good at the good goodbye. I'm doing a podcast now. You guys should listen to it. It's called Truth Works. Jessica Neal and I are doing it, and we just did a thing on goodbyes. And I'm the queen of the good goodbye. And so people are like, how come you're so good at giving feedback? Because I practice. So if you want to be good at it. So, I mean, I never got it totally right. The best I came up with was make sure you have one-on-ones, make sure that everybody gets some time. It can be virtual, it can, whatever, with whoever they report to. And once every month or so, you should have at least part of that meeting be about feedback, both ways. Okay, and you schedule that beforehand. You go, this is, hey, by the way, we're on our feedback one-on-one. I've written down some stuff you could help me do that I think would make me be more effective. And you can say, hey, by the way, the stuff we talked about last time, not going so well. So what's going on here, right? So that I get a chance to say, we have a real, and if you do that, it's a whole system. If you do that along with the metrics, if you do that along with the P&L, then I can say to you, you know, I mean, you can see the writing on the wall. Things are going to be different. I'm not sure you're going to fit.
So the last question, when you're interviewing candidates, how do you apply culture as a filter? Other than the pattern recognition person, who by definition is probably pretty proficient at that, is there a different way to?
Yeah, you. Here's how I interview. I'm not into somebody at Google. I was on stage. They're like, hand me the microphone and go, you know, sell me this microphone. I'm like, what a fucking ridiculous question. Like, you know, are you hiring me to sell microphones? I mean, this is just like stupid. Well, it's my question to find out if people are creative. I'm like, it's your question to find out if people think you're clever. Like, whatever. Okay, so here's how I interview. I pick something on their resume, and I pull the thread. Wow, you were part of the team that developed this product, and you were the leader of that team. Really? What was your title? Oh, you weren't. You just, it was informal. Okay. And was it on time? No. Okay. Now, so how many people were on that? 700. Wow, that big team. So if you had it to do over again, what would you have done differently? Right? And and how could your manager have supported you more, or what? And you know what? Tell me what happened in real life, in a real situation that person's really talking about. So, if they're lying, you can tell because they sound really good. Yeah. And if they haven't learned, I don't mind hiring people that have made mistakes. I actually kind of like it, but I don't want to hire anybody who's made a mistake and says, well, you know.
It was this person's fault.
It was this person's fault. They'll say, you know, back in the day, you know, we couldn't raise enough money. It's like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, so it's about, so if your culture is, for example, I'm consulting, I'll leave you with this. I'm consulting with a startup company, and I say to the CEO, what kind of culture you want? And he goes like, I'm an engineer, and I want it to be like a well-oiled machine. You know, I want it to just get stuff done, like get in there and get stuff done. I'm like, well, and this is in the old .com days. I'm like, wow, that's really interesting because there's 8 pool tables in here. And, you know, for me, I'm thinking you can put a lot of software engineers, but that's just me. So let's say you and I were playing pool, and I was about to kick your butt, and it's 2 o'clock meeting, and it's 4 minutes to 2. What do we do? And he's like, we wait until I kick your butt. And I'm like, yeah, start on time.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, we don't actually, unfortunately, have time for questions because there's so much great material in there. But
okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.